Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Future Pupils podcast. My name is Josh Bibby. Joining me once again are Amy Weir and Charlotte Arundale, who also work with me here at the University of Law. Today's podcast is called Easy CV Wins. And the idea for this podcast came about really from recording the Gaining Bar Related Experience workshop, which we have, and you can find that on Employability on Elite. If you go to recent presentations on the left-hand side and then scroll down to bar, you'll find it there. In that workshop, we covered in quite a bit of detail all the different types of things you could be doing to gain bar related experience. But we thought it'd be really nice in this podcast setting to just focus on some of those easier, quicker wins which you might be looking for on your CV. I think to start off and kind of frame our discussion, it's important to highlight that whatever CV quick wins you need will be unique and entirely dependent on yourself. First of all, you really kind of need to analyze and understand what it is that you've got in your CV at the moment. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And therefore, what are the areas that you're going to be needing to focus on building upon? Say, for example, if you're already great at mooting, done loads of moots, you'd be much better focusing your time and attention on building up the other areas that might be lacking. And the other thing to sort of mention as well is whatever time available you've got. I found that I was looking for quick CV wins in particular around that October, November time when I was on the bar course, when I had only about a month or two left until I was going to be writing my pupillage applications. So, of course, my quick, easy wins needed to be the kinds of things that would provide an immediate result that I could then put on my CV rather than applying for something that would be happening 6 months down the line. Amy, should we start off with you? Do you want to talk to us a bit about your experience with quick CV wins? Because you came to the bar from a slightly different route to me in that you did the GDL, whereas I did an undergraduate law degree.
Yeah, so I came to the GDL with relatively little, in fact, barely any legal experience because I'd come from doing an economics and politics degree. And so for me, it would have been really useful to kind of think about the kind of things that I'm looking to do on the GDL and the bar course. And for me, things like mooting, we've just been talking about kind of speed moots to get involved in and pro bono opportunities. So some of them are kind of once a week opportunities, just keep an eye out, ways of getting practical legal experience and exposure to the bar. And another one I'd say for me is it's not very time consuming to apply for various mentor schemes that there are. And once you've got a mentor, you can shadow a mentor. And that's a really good thing to put on your CV. On top of doing kind of your own visits to court. And on that note, kind of making really good notes about what you're watching. So you might take yourself to court for a couple of days and really take some writing paper and make notes about what you're seeing. What are the day-to-day activities of a barrister? What are you observing that you might consider good advocacy? So there are lots of things that you can get involved in that aren't that time consuming. And so I think that's what we're kind of aiming to talk about here and the kind of things that we've separately done. So yeah, Josh and Charlotte, on the bar course, what kind of things did you do? Because it's obviously a very busy period, especially if you're working part-time as well.
Yeah, it definitely is very busy, very intense. Main things that I wanted on the bar course was a bit more mooting experience, sort of more recent and fresh mooting experience that was. And also I was struggling with some of the sets of. So I was going for predominantly crime sets, but I knew I was also going to be applying for some common law sets.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have enough to talk about on my application forms as to why I was applying for common law pupillages, and therefore why I might be interested in like family and civil work too. So for me, it was things like attending virtual events on family law. I actually managed to hit two birds with one stone and do a family law moot as well, which was quite lucky. But yeah, that was kind of the weakness I was addressing at that point. What about you, Charlotte?
So mine was a little bit different because I was on the advocacy committee, so there wasn't so much that we could do with our time because that already took up a large proportion of any free time that we had on the bar course. But through that, I did coach the Jessup team, so that was something that we did in the evenings. And maybe you could look at coaching other moots, or I don't know, maybe school teams and things like that. I think that can be done through Young Citizens, which is part of the pro bono scheme that we have at university. Otherwise, I did a couple of external moots. I did the Quick 36 group plea and litigation competition because that's something you can do from home and it's just a video upload. I also did my INS moot and I had a mentor as well.
Yeah, and on the pro bono point, I did some pro bono I did vocalize on the GDL, and that's the kind of thing that doesn't take up too much time because the training was one evening a week, and it is really manageable around your studies, so it's looking out for things like that. And then if you're on the GDL and going on to the bar course, considering things like doing the LLM bar course and doing it with the pro bono option, because for me, I couldn't show that I had any practical legal experience because I hadn't done a lot at uni and I was doing the GDL, and so that way it was incorporated into my studies. I didn't have to kind of actively find practical legal experience. It was kind of embedded in my study. So I think that's a really good option and a way of showing practical legal experience on your CV.
I think when you're looking for different opportunities to do, I'd be really quite critical of yourself about whether what it is that this thing is going to add. So I was a bit worried when I was on the bar course that I hadn't at that point got any what am I looking for? Sorry, any pro bono experience at all. So I signed up to do street law just because I thought that was going to be a quick, easy one to do. But it wasn't actually that helpful.
Yeah.
I found street law is a good scheme, but basically I was going for crime predominantly. We were doing a presentation for small business advice and business structures and things, which had absolutely nothing to do with any of the practice areas I was interested in. And we did it as a virtual presentation because of COVID. So I didn't really get any additional public speaking presenting skills beyond what I already had on my CV. It was just like another version of what I already had on my CV. So yeah, in hindsight, I probably should have done a more relevant pro bono scheme if I was still going to do one. So I think that's just something to really think about.
I think that. Sorry, Charlotte, you go.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think the pro bono kind of schemes are run a little bit differently now to how they were when we did the course, because obviously it was COVID. But at the moment, we are highlighting things on the landing page that says BPC, LPC. So I would recommend going for those types of things, or GDL and above, like looking for your level of study and kind of pitching it at that.
Yeah, and goes back to what you were saying at the start, Josh, about kind of picking gaps in your CV, thinking where do I need to show commitment that I have for this? And I think that's really important. So you aren't doing things that aren't adding something. And another one that we spoke about before is kind of attending tribunals, because again, you're observing advocacy, or it might be in a particular area that you're interested in. For example, there's a really good Twitter page about the Court of Protection, and it basically tells you what hearings you can attend, when you can attend them, where they are, and things like that just show that you're committed, you have an interest, you're willing to learn about these areas of law. And so it is worth looking at what kind of tribunals you can attend and what's out there for you to just go and sit in the public gallery, essentially.
I'm pretty sure you can just attend the property tribunal, like as and whenever you want. So that would be something slightly different to do. And there's also the Ellipse program, which will kind of link you up. It's almost like a work experience program for employment law. So that's another thing to keep an eye out for.
That idea of getting the ball rolling when you're applying for things like minis or other stuff like that, particularly if you're at like an LLB or GDL stage and you're really struggling to get that first me pupillage or something under your belt, if you can have on your application form, that you've been attending these kinds of hearings, you've been interested in what you're hearing and the legal issues, and now you want to learn about more of it from that barrister's perspective, then then I think that kind of gives you a bit more of a route in, because really what it's all about is breaking that chicken and egg cycle of, well, you know, you need experience to get experience.
Yeah. And there are opportunities for other areas of law. Obviously, I'm only really know specifically crime, but a lot of my people that were also doing the bar course alongside me would attend events. There's various organizations, so kind of looking at what these organizations are running. So kind of they've got the Criminal Bar Association that might run events or talks in the same way the Commercial Bar Association will run events and talks that you might not specifically put that on your CV, but it might lead you to something else, or it might make you aware of something or spark an interest in something that you can write on your CV. So I think it is a case of looking out for these kind of opportunities to demonstrate your commitment, and also maybe highlight to you what you're interested in.
What do you think about going to events with solicitors' firms? Because I had a brief period just before starting the bar course when I was speculatively thinking, what if I went for the commercial bar? It was a stupid idea because everyone rejected me on paper because my grades weren't good enough for the commercial bar. But I ended up going to a few events with different solicitors' firms, their open days and things, to try and show a bit of interest and understanding in that area. Do you think that's useful or not? Because I mean, it's very difficult to tell when you don't get feedback from rejected application forms, but I think I probably wasted my time there.
Yeah, it's not something I've thought about doing, to be honest, but I can also see why you might want to do that, because you're kind of seeing it from the other sides, like people that are going to be instructing you. But I personally haven't done those kind of events.
I have, more in terms of kind of a shadowing opportunity. I think it's a good way to show that you know why you want to be a barrister as opposed to a solicitor. I think it answers that question, which quite often does come up when you get to interview. And the same with solicitor advocates. If you're lucky enough to be able to sit and see any of those in court, even if you're just in the back and you've noticed it's a solicitor advocate instead of a barrister, it's a good way to say, oh, I noticed that the barrister did this differently, or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, do you know what, actually? Now that you mentioned that, Charlotte, it reminds me, one of the best application forms I saw this pupillage application cycle just gone. Candidate was applying for like public law type sets, and they'd done a vacation scheme at quite a good law firm. And basically what they were writing about in terms of that experience was the fact that they enjoyed the work, but really they wanted to be the person on the receiving end of the instructions who was then taking that case to the next level, acting as the real expert in it, and going into a lot more depth in the legal issues.
Yeah, that is a good point, because even in questions, like even if they don't specifically ask why barrister not solicitor, even on the why barrister question, that adds that depth that well, you might be interested in the legal element, but this is why specifically a barrister. I think that is a really good point, actually, and would be useful.
I think this probably leads me on to, I mean, I hadn't really thought about this when I was saying my last point, but actually one of the biggest quick, easy CV wins that you can have, and was something I used to advise on a lot in careers appointments, is to think creatively about the things you've done. I think just by having a proper analysis of track record to date in terms of like what you've done, your achievements, your roles in certain things, and mapping out what we call like the islands of awesomeness. So basically making a spider diagram for yourself, and in each spider in the middle is like a thing you've done, and then you put from that all of the competencies that you gain from it, and all the different things you've done. You really do understand your strengths. I think I had like 3.5 years experience in the police, and the first time I applied for pupillage, which was unsuccessfully, I really underplayed and undervalued a lot of the different things that I'd done. And then it was only the second year when I was writing about things in quite a different way, and being really, well, not necessarily too creative, but just clever in how I was talking about my examples. That meant that I'd covered far more bases than I thought I could.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because even obviously that has its own legal element, but even with non-legal things, there are often elements of your experience that will transfer to the bar, and it's important not to underplay those. So for example, you might have been on a committee at university and actually been required to do some public speaking there, whether that's to a kind of the other club captains or presidents or something. So it is, I think that's a really good point, not to underplay your experiences, even if they're not legal as well, because a lot of them you can talk about these transferable skills.
That also goes for any part-time work you might have. I had an interview and they asked me how my sales job at Benefit Cosmetics would help me at the bar. So I was able to say something along the lines of it's quite similar to an examination in chief and how you ask open questions when you're trying to select a product for somebody. But really don't downplay any part-time jobs you've done or you've got. It also shows tenacity, which is really important at the bar.
So really, I think it all goes to building your brand as a candidate. And it's something that's quite important when you get into practice as a self-employed barrister anyway. You do kind of, to an extent, need to build a bit of a brand and reputation for yourself. And I think when chambers can spot that you have a real grip of who you are as a candidate, what you offer, what your strengths are, it makes you more persuasive and attractive as a candidate, but also it makes their life a lot easier too, because they've got something that they can grapple with. Oh, you're the candidate who specializes in this or something, or you're the candidate who really brings the other thing.
Yeah, and that's almost an element of being yourself and not feeling like you have to fit a certain formula to apply to the bar. Because likewise, to you, Charlotte, a lot of people ask about my working at a pub, like my bar experience, just because like dealing with people, customers. So don't feel as though you have to kind of fit this set formula of person. That actually chambers want you to be yourself and want to, as you say, Josh, like have that own kind of brand, because that's what makes you appealing. That's what makes you then want to meet you and get to know you and understand how you would kind of be an asset to their chambers.
So do you think maybe actually we've misnamed this episode of the podcast? Instead of easy wins, it should be more about smart CV wins, because if you work smart, you can really avoid having to spend loads of time doing things that are going to be irrelevant or unhelpful for your CV and application. Don't get me wrong. Like when I say I said at the outset about the gaining bar related experience video, if you watch that in its full, you'll kind of get a good flavor of the breadth of things you'll probably need to have on your CV to be successful. But if you can focus your effort and time on these things that are going to get the maximum benefit for the minimum effort, it means that you can also be focusing on your studies at the same time and get those really impressive grades, which ultimately is still one of the biggest factors for getting you through that paper sift stage.
Things like competitions are a really good one to put on your CV. Essay competitions, meeting, as we've already mentioned. Are there any other competition type things other than essays? Or is it mainly essay competitions?
It is mostly essay and mooting or advocacy type ones. Some of them have like problem question type competitions, which are slightly different to the essay competitions.
Yeah.
But actually, no, on essay competitions, one of my friends from our class decided fairly late on that he was going to switch track and apply for the criminal bar. It was actually successful this year. And one of the main things that he did to demonstrate his new sort of interest in the criminal bar was he won a criminal law essay competition. And not only did that really help his application and show his academic ability or written advocacy and interest in that practice area, but it also won him, I think he won like $1,500 from it. So they can be really, really useful ways to spend your time. Obviously, you can't plan your life finances around winning essay competitions. But again, think about working smart, not hard. If you win an essay competition, it might mean you don't have to do as much part-time work or something like that when funding your studies.
Yeah, it's also interesting for you and yourself. If you're writing an essay about an area of law, that might then become useful for a pupillage question that says, tell us about an area of law you want to change or something, because that's quite common, or a question about the law. So it's not going to be it's going to be beneficial for many reasons doing essay competitions. I think even if you don't win it, you're not going to have lost a lot.
I think
No, that's it. Yeah.
Going off competitions, any feedback that you get which is particularly good, you can also note that on your CV. That's something nice to show what you've done and what you got out of that competition. If maybe you didn't win it, at least you might have had some positive feedback that you can keep there.
Yeah, and another thing is mock trials, because I know I did one with ULaw and that was really useful. It wasn't too time consuming because it was a day and you can prep around your studies, but obviously shows that you're kind of getting stuck in and learning. And it's the kind of thing you get feedback from as well, in the same way as you would for a moot, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. The one that we do at the moment, and hopefully it will continue next term, is actually with a judge in the Royal Courts of Justice, and he spends loads of time afterwards giving detailed feedback to the participants. So I think that's really invaluable. And obviously, when he says something went well, if I was that student, I would definitely be noting it down for my CV.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Because I think it's feedback brings your application form to life when you're talking about anything where mock trials, mooting, other advocacy type stuff. It also really helps when you can talk about getting specific feedback in one competition and implementing it successfully in another, or in other things that you've done.
Yeah, and I don't know if either of you used qualifying sessions in your pupillage applications or on your CV at all, but in the Temple Advocacy Weekend, we were given the opportunity to do advocacy and do a sort of mock trial. And in that, we got feedback, and I used the feedback I got in that in quite a few of my applications and mentioned it on my CV, because, again, it shows that you're learning.
Yeah, I'd only say with qualifying sessions, just be careful how you use it. I mean, you can use it in successful ways, sort of like you say, Amy, but it's one of those things where what you're saying about that qualifying session has to be sufficiently different to what everyone else has got, because at the end of the day, qualifying sessions are mandatory.
So sorry, Josh, you carry on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, because it's not something that you've had to apply for. It's not necessarily something that makes you stand out from other candidates, unless you've got like particular bits of feedback which are really specific to you, and then that was either so good that it's worth mentioning in its own right, or you've then implemented it somewhere else successfully. That would kind of be my view on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't write on my CV attended X, Y, and Z. I think it's more that if you got the opportunity to do a specific piece of advocacy and got feedback on it, and as you say, were able to implement it, or it showed you what makes a good advocate or something, that's the kind of time that you can use it in your applications, or it's the time I used it in my applications.
Yeah. I think also, though, like other talks and events that you attend at the Inn or with other organisations can be useful on that CV, again, for demonstrating things like your interest and commitment to that particular practice area. I often find that that sort of like late autumn time, kind of October going into November, just before pupillage application season, chambers do tend to have quite a lot of these webinars and seminars and stuff online that you can attend for free. It's normally quite a quick, easy registration process. So watching some of those in the evenings can really kind of help you along with that.
Do we want to talk a little bit about how we found these experiences? I think most of it's self-explanatory. I'd say for pro bono, it's keeping an eye out on your emails, isn't it, really?
Yeah, most stuff is sent out in the employability newsletter, so new opportunities are always there if you're looking for things through the university, and they do publish external opportunities too on the employability portal. Admittedly, I never really used it very much when I was at the university, but working here now, I know how many opportunities there actually are, and I kind of wish that I had made the most of them when I had the chance. So that's definitely something that I would recommend that people do.
Yeah, and keeping an eye out for meeting opportunities. You can always, there's usually things on the Inn's websites, but again, emails from the university, emails from the bar mailing list will be highlighting these kind of opportunities. So it is worth keeping an eye out.
Or even just Google.
Yeah.
Like just a Google sweep every now and then just to see what's going on can always help. And Twitter as well, actually. Twitter's quite a big one, I think, for legal opportunities and legal competitions. Legal Twitter is huge.
Yeah. And knowing some good accounts to follow that highlight some useful experiences.
Yeah, if you get following the kinds of chambers that you're interested in applying to on LinkedIn, if they've got any events coming up, they'll normally be advertising them on LinkedIn. And quite often they'll also be sharing other useful events and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
That's
very true. And LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, I just find it kind of quite an easy way to keep on top of that kind of thing, because like you tend to build a bit of like it's the same with Twitter really, you kind of build a bit of a legal sphere for yourself, don't you? Because all of these accounts that you start following, they'll either like or retweet other relevant things.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a bit of a snowball effect.
Yeah, because you can get quite far on Twitter without following that many accounts because everyone else is just kind of streamlining the relevant stuff.
The other thing as well is that like it kind of helps you without having to think about it or like work too hard at it. It helps you to keep on top of like current affairs type stuff related to the practice areas you're interested in.
Yeah, and on that note, there are some really useful things you can sign up to, like mailing lists. So Inner Temple do a really good one, the current awareness mailing list, where you just sign up, you put your email in, and every day they send you an email with kind of current cases, anything legal in the news, and that kind of thing. You're not going to put it on your CV, but it might highlight to you something that's going on or does keep you up to date with the law in a very easy and accessible way. So things like that are worth looking out for.
That's infamous, isn't it? The Inner Temple newsletter.
Yeah, current awareness. They also do an outreach newsletter, but I presume that in other instances maybe do something similar.
The other one I found really useful when I was on the bar course was Civil Litigation Brief.
Okay.
I think it's run by like a barrister in Manchester somewhere. Anyway, it's like just updates on recent cases to do with civil litigation, civil procedure, really. So it's helpful for the bar course, but helpful anyway if you're interested in civil or commercial type practice areas.
Yeah.
I also like scanning newspapers. Not that you should take all of your opinions from them, of course, but it's nice just to have an idea of what's going on. I think Guardian law is quite good, personally. But
yeah, I think just because of the theme of this podcast being on CVs, I wouldn't necessarily put at the bottom of your CV that you read these emails regularly or whatever, because it's a nothing on your CV, if you know what I mean. In terms of it doesn't really like add much, because it's just kind of baseline knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't. I think it's just a way of keeping up to date with and maybe opening your eyes to potential opportunities. But yeah, no, CV wise, it's not something that I would have on there personally. But I think we've covered most of the kind of important and easy CV wins and ways to make your CV stand out. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add before we maybe wrap up.
No, I don't think so. I think, ultimately, you can save yourself a lot of effort, energy, and time by going through that thorough analysis to start with as to what exactly it is that you need to add to make yourself a really strong applicant. And then focus on those areas through the things we've been talking about.
Yeah, I'd agree. And as you've said, don't undersell yourself.
Yeah.
Don't think there's anything else to add except for that you can book an appointment with the careers consultants, with Amy, and with Anna Williams if you need any help looking through your CV.
Yeah, and if you're at the other campuses other than the London Bloomsbury one, then your on-campus careers advisors will be able to give you detailed advice as well on your CV too. So yeah, do use our resources here, and hopefully if you get that analysis done at an early enough stage, then you kind of set yourself up well for the challenge ahead. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Future Pupils podcast. we look forward to speaking to you again soon.